Hey, everybody, we are back with another episode of the 6-5 podcast, episode 167. 167 times we've gone round and round, you and me, 6 topics, 5 minutes each, minimum news, lots of analysis, what we do. It's Friday morning, Pat. It's been a great week. I did not get on an airplane this week. Whew, feels good because the next, 8, there will not be one where I do not get on an airplane. It's freaking event season, Pat, and earnings season is kind of wrapping, at least the biggest part of it. And we're going to be talking a lot about this week. How are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great. Yeah, this is the calm before the storm. I'm 3 straight weeks on a plane. Well, actually, I look at contiguous weeks. I'm gone for 3 straight weeks with less than 12 hours between stops. Good news is it's long enough to come in, repack some stuff, take some stuff to some daily cleaners. But no, this is my favorite time of the week, even though I'm a little bit worn out after the week. This is the highlight. I don't know why, Dan. I don't know if it's because it involves my bestie. It's just riffing without restraint. I mean, we literally say what we want without getting canceled within cancel rules. And I like it. I really do.
Are we still doing that, Pat? Is that still a thing? Are people still doing the cancel thing? I feel like we got bored of it and moved on.
Yeah, less canceling going on. I think, when one side started getting canceled too, it became out of vogue, which is kind of funny.
Oh, no. You mean we're not all getting along still. That's too bad. That's too bad. Well, the good news is with the rise of the machine, we can all come to the conclusion that our days are numbered. So let's make the most of those that we have left. Is everybody out there watching? Do you know, in fact, if this is Patrick and I, or is this PatBot, DanBot? I may or may not be, constructing a plan to build the DanBot. Pat, will you build a PatBot? Because I think we could give people 24/7 Patrick and Daniel. And I can't imagine anybody that wouldn't want to watch it. Sometimes when I'm on Zoom, I just turn on the self view and I'm enamored by how good I look. Joking. But in all seriousness, we could go around the clock with our insights, 10,000 blogs. What do you have? I have like 150,000 tweets. We could be entertaining the world with our technology thoughts for at least another year or two before people would run out of new content.
Dan, that's pretty scary. I'd like to go in and hopefully can improve myself. That would be great. Lose less weight. Lose more weight, look better.
I can do that.
Say smarter things.
I can lose less weight. I know how to do that. And today's my beautiful wife's birthday. So if anybody is out there that knows her, just wanted to point out that I said happy birthday. She's a spry 28. What's a good year to say? I'm supposed to make her younger, but not make it so young that it's weird. What is 35? I don't know.
30s is good, Dan.
30s is good. I'm embracing my 40s, by the way, Pat.
Yeah.
I turn 42 later this month. Send gifts to Patrick on my behalf, or just make donations to a charity that actually uses the money well, which is rare anymore these days. All right, we got a great show for you today. We're going to cover a bunch more earnings. I know. The 6-5, we're supposed to be covering tech, but earnings are the ground. It's the ground truth of what's going on with these tech companies. We got AMD, we got Qualcomm, we got Lattice. We've got a remarkably surprising good result from Apple. Are you really surprised? Pat's going to dive deep into Zoho, one of the companies that came to town and had an event this week. We all got together. There's some photo evidence of this, Patrick, out there on the interwebs. And then we're going to talk about more Microsoft AI announcements. I don't know if you watched this morning. The CEO of OpenAI was on CNBC Squawk Box. Watched a lot about that. The question is, are the machines going to take over? Well, let's just say we're making progress. But I'm not entirely sure. So quick disclaimer, since we are going to talk a lot about earnings today, this show is for information and entertainment purposes only. And while we will be talking a lot about publicly traded companies and their equities, we are not equities advisors and we are not providing any sort of investment advice. Please do not do anything based upon what you hear here on the 6-5. Patrick, this was a long and emotional and drawn out, but hey, I'm the best moderator in the world other than you. Who says that, by the way? Who says that all the time?
Definitely J. Cal.
Please. I mean, we do really like that show, but I hold his perception of being the best in contempt because I believe you are the best moderator in the world. Okay.
Oh,
Rock and
Dan, I know
roll.
you're saying that because you just want me to say you're the best
No,
moderator. I know how
you're
this
the
works.
best. You're the best.
You're the best.
You're the best. Listen, it's not all about me, Pat.
But
It's
sometimes it's about you.
It is sometimes all about me. So,
Yeah.
all right, listen, rock and roll. AMD, Pat, company we are both bullish on, but how did they perform this quarter?
Yeah, they performed pretty much exactly as they said, and versus expectations. I mean, they beat on EPS by 6.5 points, and they beat met by revenue. And by the way, that beat beat meet is within 1% for me. They beat on revenue by 0.84%. And going into that, I think that's pretty good. Particularly when you look at the market, right? What they're walking into is an extremely light PC market, right? And overall, the server market is difficult. On the plus side, they really crushed it in embedded and really showed the street again. One of the reasons that they acquired Xilinx was bringing in Xilinx makes the highs less high, but makes the lows less low. And that's exactly what we're hitting here. The PC and the server market are in the shits. Beep. And Xilinx really helped them. The number, they absolutely crushed it for growth in embedded. Yes, I get it. This still has some acquisition numbers in it, but up 163%. Even though the server market was down, they still had double-digit Epic sales. Lisa made a comment on the call that she said that yeah, we think the conditions are right that we could continue to gain more server share this year. That's in alignment with what I've been saying about 2023. Intel has a much stronger roadmap in 24 and 25. One of the things that they did that Lisa did do, and we're going to talk about this even when it comes to Qualcomm, is Lisa gave a little bit of a hint about the future of AI. She called it on the call the company's #1 strategic priority. And Lisa doesn't mince words. She doesn't get ahead of things. She pretty much what Lisa says happens. They formed an AI group under ex-Xilinx CEO Victor Peng, which, by the way, is an ex-AMD guy, ex-ATI guy. And he has been working for a while, cross-collaborating with the team of how to move this forward. And AMD is not new to AI. Actually, most AI inference is done on a CPU, although I know it's not cool to talk about that. But when it comes to discrete cards, whether that be training or inference, NVIDIA owns the day. If they don't have 90%, 95% market share, I know you've pointed this out in your Market Watch articles. It's still a lot. But AMD has had a lot of success with national labs, where it's about flops, but also as they move to AI, it's about AI. And this MI300 accelerator that's coming out, I'm really interested to hear about. The #1 thing I want to hear about is the software strategy. I 100% believe, and I told a Forbes columnist this, the print, not the web folks like me, that I fully believe that AMD can field the right hardware. The question I have is on the software. We don't do rumors on the show, but Bloomberg did bring out a rumor, interestingly enough, when I was giving this interview, that said Microsoft and AMD are going to be collaborating on an AI accelerator. So I'm gonna leave it there. I have more to say. I might come back and loop around, but anyways, that's my overall thoughts.
Why don't we do rumors?
I just did it. But we can dive in. Dan, why don't you? Why would Microsoft ever want to collaborate with a company on and not just, have it be an all NVIDIA shop?
I don't know. I mean, price, performance, flexibility, open source, scale, ESG, lots of different reasons. Right now, the pot of gold is very, very large, and everybody's trying to figure out how to wrap their arms around it with AI. We're going to see massive growth, mid double-digit CAGR for AI over the next several years, according to numerous different surveys out there. And with the speed and trajectory, I actually, between you and me, not sure that those surveys have fully caught up to the opportunity that actually is AI. I think we're going to see bigger CAGR growth. And again, AI was going to go from being sort of a vertical or a technology adjacency to a overarching theme, like digital transformation, which, by the way, I know a guy that knows a little bit about this. So, quickly, you hit a lot of the key points to me. This was probably business. I kind of think I quoted it as business as usual for AMD. They put up forth a number, they beat it. They guided a little bit soft. I think Lisa's being conservative right now. There's still a lot of uncertainty in the macro, and it's a responsible CEO that's going to look at that situation and say, I'm going to put numbers forth that I'm very confident that we can achieve. And if the market gets a little bit better, we'll beat it. And I prefer that to, overly optimistic. There's still too many uncertainties out there. I mean, didn't another major bank fail this week? It was FRC. I think there's 3 or 4 more teetering. We raised interest rates again. And let's be clear, people, all these things are intertwined. This is not like, the bank issues over here. The banks are where the money is being held for companies that are paying and operating and investing. Not to mention banks themselves are net buyers of a lot of technology. And right now you've got an entire subset other than the big 3 or 4 banks that are all teetering. They're all on stilts right now. Our economy's a little bit on stilts because I don't think the market is fully caught up to all the macro things going on. So back to AMD though, AMD is performing well. It's performing fine. This quarter was, like I said, business as usual.
Yeah.
Everything that's going on in the macro, especially the PC numbers, all, took place. And that's to be expected. The overall consensus from Lisa and other CEOs has been that the back half of this year will be better for semis. And by the way, I believe semis, because they sell ahead of when the OEMs actually ship units, we'll start to see some improvement in semis probably before we'll start to see it in devices, sans Apple. Apple's numbers are always just mind-boggling to me. The biggest thing for AMD though, and what I put out there in Market Watch, is that NVIDIA is in a really unique juxtaposition right now because NVIDIA has close to 90% of its market share, and NVIDIA has enjoyed this wild lead and competitive advantages across the board. But everything with NVIDIA has been built around CUDA, and CUDA is its proprietary language. It requires that companies basically commit and lock into this environment. But you've got the rise of new competition. We talked about the Microsoft rumor. We talked about what's going on with AWS and Inferentia. Google TPUs, there's an advancement there. And of course, you've got Intel and AMD. They're saying, we're not going to, go away and not play in this space. You've got startups like Grok, who we're an investor in. We got Samba Nova and others that are trying to build lower cost accelerators that can do large language model workloads at a much lower cost and a much more efficient from a power perspective. So even if the market gets bigger and NVIDIA keeps growing at a really high growth rate, I would not be surprised if they start to cede share. And this is the interesting inflection point. And I think AMD could be the company that capitalizes first. It has the popularity, it has the woo, it has the investor sort of backing, and people really seem to like it. And it seems to have a plan. Now, whether this comes to fruition, we shall see. But good quarter for NVIDIA. I'm going to keep us moving here because I could rattle on and on and on about this, but let's talk about another company, Pat, that has a story to tell in AI that maybe isn't getting full credit for it, but also a company that's huge for handsets, and that's Qualcomm. Qualcomm is a company, and Pat, you and I over several quarters have been really ringing its diversification plan. A year ago, they pivoted from kind of their 4 buckets to 3. They used to be handsets, RFFE, their front end, automotive, and Internet of Things. They took the RFFE business and kind of merged it across kind of horizontally, like I talked about with AI, because it's part of every part of their systems. But now they've got handsets, automotive, and Internet of Things. We all, again, expected a fairly soft quarter from Qualcomm. We know chip shipments are down. We know handset shipments are in a lull. We saw Samsung's dismal results. I mean, they just were. What did their profit drop? Like 95%? It was some amazing number.
Yeah, memory is tough. It's a tough business to be in, and particularly if it's memory for smartphones and
Absolutely.
displays and stuff like that.
Absolutely. But here's the good part of the Qualcomm number is they really were within range across the board. They came to the top end of their revenue guidance. They were in the range of their EPS guidance. Of course, they were down on a year over year basis, but this was down from those kind of peak periods of time from shipments for over the last few years of mobile devices. Handset business, continues to be softer, a little bit like the PC business. Like I said, Apple's the outlier, and we'll talk about that later in the show. Automotive has been a really great growth area for the company, something to definitely was a lever to pull on of positivity. And then, IoT, continues to be a strong $1+ billion on a quarterly basis, 1.4 this quarter. And it's an area that I don't think most people really think about for Qualcomm, but the ambient connectivity of technology in smart cities and buildings and factories and how, Qualcomm's technology plays a role is very, very interesting. The licensing business, of course, is going to slow down when you're shipping less handsets, although, they do get a piece of all the Apple business still. And so that's a part that actually helps prop up the business. I think the one thing, Pat, you and I will probably want to lean into here, though, is that the handset business is a cyclical one like PC. And so it will come back, it will go down, it will come back up, and it will rise. And the demand for mobile handsets is going to be driven by a few factors. One is, just refresh cycles. Refresh cycles naturally create more demand. But of course, in an economic slowdown, people will wait longer to refresh. AI, though, is going to create a whole nother wave, because what Qualcomm is building in their handsets and devices is going to be inference at the edge that can do a lot with these large language models, even when you don't have connectivity, or when you have connectivity that doesn't require any interaction with the cloud, Pat. And this is a really huge thing. You and I were at Mobile World Congress. We were able to witness a 1 billion parameter large language model being run, stable diffusion, on a device that wasn't connected to the internet.
Yeah.
Pretty impressive. But AI is going to be used for things also, Pat, that are very practical. Things like privacy and security. Things like making systems reliable and making sure you get the benefits of AI on your device, even when you got limited or no connectivity, that your device is still able to take advantage of AI. And of course, AI has a very impressive, everything from their image sensors to their VPUs to their security tools that are all going to use AI that are going to make handsets more secure. Now, interestingly, Pat, we haven't heard much from Apple about their AI strategy. Of course, they've got the AI sensors and stuff in their devices, but nothing yet about what they're actually planning to do from a generative standpoint. Qualcomm, I think, really does believe, and I think, Pat, I have to say I agree, that the edge, we've talked about it with PCs. And by the way, Qualcomm's in PCs. We haven't seen the best of what they're going to offer yet, which is something I'm more bullish on. But we are just starting to hear about what this edge inference is going to mean. And with large language models, the opportunity that's going to create. I think there's going to be a huge sell-through of devices when people can start to do 10 billion plus parameter models on their devices without connectivity. And by the way, this isn't just infused into handsets. This is going to be infused into automotive, which has been a huge growth area for Qualcomm. It's going to be infused into IoT for ambient and sensing technologies, and it's going to be embedded into their PC. So, Pat, I've talked too long. I got a warning message from our producer. So I'm going to pass it over to you here. That's my thoughts on Qualcomm.
No, you did a great breakdown, and I want to thank Qualcomm CEO Cristiano Amon and CFO Akash for the time that they gave both of us breaking down the earnings. You broke it down really well. The one thing I want to remind everybody is that they did beat Wall Street expectations on revenue, right? And they miss or met on EPS. It was really the future guide that was a challenge. Everybody knew that the smartphone market was down, but it was that guide that did this. I want to point out too that automotive 20% year-on-year growth, and they are likely gaining share there. And the company did talk about how it likely gained share in handsets. So you can only control what you can control. And put enough investment in the future to make it happen. And one of those big investment areas, like you said, was AI. And when I look at the case for edge AI, it's very simple to me. I mean, whether you call it the law of gravity, wherever the data is created is the best place for that compute to be. And that's just historically been true for 40 years. So if you're capturing all that data, you want to do something. If you want higher levels of privacy and security with lower latency, that's just the way that you're going to do it. So this isn't a stretch for me. And whether it's tablets, PCs, smartphone, XR headsets, the cars, industrial IoT endpoints, generative AI is going to make its way there. I mean, we've already seen intonations from Google. We've already seen heard from what Microsoft is going to do there. We see some little cookie crumbs in studio effects. Imagine when the entire weight of Microsoft that we've seen primarily in Bing so far puts their weight into Windows. And so what's the Qualcomm case, right? If this new generative AI could shift preference for the device makers and maybe even allow them to charge more, that means that Qualcomm can charge more, or they're going to take share if they are the best person with the capability for the technology. Without a doubt, I mean, Android, hands down, I mean, they're dominant in that position. Then the question is between Android and iOS, where Tim Cook last night on the call made a few esoteric comments about it not being ready. Let's be careful, which you would expect, particularly when I think Apple's likely behind. It has likely not been a focus, and they're not going to show up until it's perfect. So net, I think Qualcomm is very well positioned for generative AI. And if they play their cards right, and their partners do, they'll probably pick up margin dollars.
Well, there you go. There you have it. And Pat, you and I did it again. We did the first, spending 28 minutes on 2, and now we're going to go lightning round.
Let's do this, baby.
The next 4. But Pat, let's talk about companies that just kick ass in any economy. And this is where I always love the market takers. Let's talk about our friend Jim Anderson, CEO of Lattice, and the performance of him and his team this quarter.
Yeah, just another boring record quarter, Dan.
First semi company in the middle of a major glut.
No, exactly. Exactly. I mean, it just blows my mind how well they did. So record revenue, 12th consecutive growth quarter, 70% gross margin, 70%. Record op inc. Net income growth was amazing. Just what a yawner. Some things that came out that I like, 50% of the design wins included one of their software stacks. That's a big deal, right? That to me is growth from going from a homogeneous environment and FPGAs to something that's more of a solution. And that's one of the biggest challenges with FPGAs is how do I program this thing? And by putting 5G, putting ORAN, putting automotive, putting industrial IoT and vision, and a lot of other stacks, that just means that's just more value. And by the way, you're competing with ASICs. You're competing then with microcontrollers, which increases your TAM. So last comment, lots of room to grow with Avant. Avant hasn't even showed up yet. So final comment, May 15th, Investor Day, the 6-5 podcast. The 6 is going to be there. Dan is going to be there driving. I am going international. I'm not going to be able to make it, but I will be there in spirit, Dan. Hugs and kisses.
Yeah, I appreciate you, taking half the credit and doing none of the work. Just kidding, everybody. Just kidding. We've gotten each other's back in the past. Sometimes it's me, sometimes it's the 6, sometimes it's the 5. And of course, since we're expanding now, we've got new faces in the firm. Did we mention on the show that we added an amazing new show connected with Diana Blass? That's going to be launching really soon. She's a rock star, and I look forward. Anyways, I don't want to have the Lattice earnings fall too far from the grace they deserve. But Pat, look, how do you beat and raise when every other semiconductor company is literally, hanging by the thread on the chinny chin chin? I mean, this is a company that just does things right. And of course, the programmability, the flexibility that they offer, and the fact that they are often in an accompanying semiconductor in many, many designs enables them to get scale. They've won a lot of designs, and even in the condensed or shrinking markets in OEMs they're still growing. Which, Pat, by the way, what does this mean for them when the when the trend flips and all of a sudden all the other companies are growing really fast? They're growing right alongside. So I actually think this is a company that is in an incredibly good position. They're aligned to 5G, they're aligned to AI, they're aligned to IoT, they're aligned to robotics, they're aligned to server. They're in all the right spaces, and they have a story to tell. They basically diversified themselves out of most of the complicated parts of their business and consumer. They got a little bit of exposure there, and that was probably the weakest part of their report. But also, Pat, they're expanding margin, which means they have a lot of pricing power, which means, the company can continue to make more money on even less revenue. So even if growth slows down, they're able to make more dollars out of every dollar that they sell. It's just a very well-run company, Pat. And of course, at $1 billion, it's different than when you're at 50 billion, and the ability to continue this types of growth from where they're at now to 5 to 10 billion a year in revenue. But you got to like their prospects, Pat, and you got to like the fact that they've added TAM consistently and that they're running a really good race. So, like I said in the beginning, I'll say it at the end. Congratulations to that team. That was a great report. It was one of the best semi reports of this quarter by far. All right, Pat, let's pivot to one that you and I both enjoy talking about. Are
you going to try to be not a fanboy, please?
Well, I was going to be a fanboy of Apple so that you could be the jerk. No, I'm not going to be a fanboy. Look, I said it in my tweet, and you could interpret this as a good or a bad thing. The company is it's like a sleight of hand. There was not a single indicator that iPhone would have a good quarter based upon what was going on in the macro, based on even like the IDC numbers on PC shipments. Everything that was out there about devices was indicating that this should be a really bad quarter. Now, again, Apple's approach to guide is late. They don't guide far out. They don't
guide. They haven't guided since 2020.
They indicate in their earnings calls a feeling for the next quarter, but they do not specific. You're right. They don't give you more than what's kind of their thought process over the next 90 days. And again, they don't even give you specifics. So this leaves the analysts having to basically guess. And so their beat may or may not actually have been any sort of beat of what their expectations were. But what the analysts could come up with, they were expecting, by the way, just $94 billion a quarter in revenue. They beat on the top, they beat on the bottom. Again, they beat the analyst expectations, not the guide. They expanded margins, and they were pretty stable across all categories. Now, again, this doesn't mean I don't think they're the most that this is the company that requires the most regulatory out of any company on the planet right now and getting none. But that's another story for another day, because let's instead regulate VMware, because that's the big problem. But anyways, the areas that I was looking for, Pat, really is, I'm watching closely the service on this company, because this is the big pivot. You saw they had this really interesting inflow of are they a bank now? I mean, what's happening there? Is Apple actually a charter bank, or is that a partnership?
No, I mean, they're definitely getting it. Well, no, it's I don't know.
It's okay. I didn't actually look into it yet either. But when you hear about inflows of deposits, then you go, wait, is Apple a bank? I mean, they're getting into financial service products for sure, fintech products. I mean, they always were with pay, but services, the investments they're making in Plus and TV and in gaming, they're getting across the board. I mean, look, they were a little soft on iPad. Mac business we know is crappy, and they were a little bit soft on that. But Pat, I guess what I was trying to explain is where is the sleight of hand? How do you beat by like $4 billion worth of phones versus what everybody had been able to calculate? So the calculus of all these analysts, and there's a lot of analysts on the equity side that follow Apple, calculated 48.8, and then it came up in at 51.3. Where's all this demand coming from? Is it India? Is it China? And it's a really interesting inflection right now, because, you saw Qualcomm's mobile numbers really, really soft. And of course, Apple's buying volumes ahead of, So the timing means Qualcomm's numbers may have come in quarters back, and now Apple's numbers are coming in on finished product, and now they're sitting on inventory. But there was nothing to indicate in the market that the consumer is strong. And for Apple, it's consumer strength that drives the volume of purchases. And all we keep hearing about is the market's on stilts, consumers are depressed, their savings are gone, but they're still buying $1,600 iPhones. So that's my puzzle point, Pat. I'd love to get your take on it. Is this was a really pretty good quarter, and the street is rewarding Apple right now big time for this result. I didn't see it. I'm going to be honest. I just didn't see them doing this well.
Yeah, and by the way, they're ripping right now. This morning, they're number 2 on my watch list. So the way that I look at this is really balanced. And by the way, there were a lot of questions where, hey, they could rip it or they cut. Where I've wound up, based on listening to the transcripts and talking to a bunch of people. By the way, shout out to John Fort and Morgan Brennan. I did CNBC literally as they were reporting at 4:30 Eastern.
And you crushed it.
Thank you. I think there was pent-up demand where, if you remember, iPhone production, workers were getting beaten with metal poles, and they were essentially striking. And I think this was pent-up demand. There were talks about strength in India. There was also Tim Cook did an interview with CNBC literally as I was sitting there, and they were talking about strength in China, but nobody could figure out like how that even makes any sense whatsoever. But standing back, they grew 1% year on year in smartphones. And they did beat expectations by about 5%. If I look at what's in store for the future, if all of that pent-up demand is swept out, I can't imagine them doing very well next quarter. But you never know. I mean, I look at Qualcomm's forecast, and there's always a delay between a 60 and 90-day delay between the silicon and the actual production and shipment of a unit. And I don't know exactly, having distribution hubs when revenue is recognized by Qualcomm, but I can't imagine the juggernaut continuing. And the other macro point is everything else went down below expectations. Services below expectations. Mac well below expectations. iPad met or a little bit below expectations. Wearables below expectations. None of these are good signs, but none of these are self-inflicted, and they are driven by the market. At WWDC, I'm looking forward to what they talk about with respect to XR. They are late to the party related to generative AI, and they really need to get their act together. If this were a time, Apple doesn't have to be first. They just can't be 2 years late like they were with something like the phablet. Those are my thoughts.
Well, that was fabulous analysis. A nice job on CNBC yesterday. You are infamous. All right, so let's go to the next thing. Zoho, you spent the day yesterday in Austin with Zoholics. I spent the evening before at the part where they served the drinks and the food, and that was pretty fun. It was good to see you and all of our friends out there. But Pat, what were the big? Did they talk about generative AI, Pat?
So Dan, I do want to be like you when I grow up. There were some highlights here. So if you're not familiar with Zoho, they're a leader in an end-to-end enterprise SaaS suite. They have their own top to bottom infrastructure. They do everything themselves. They do have obviously APIs to services if you prefer to use things like Gmail, but they're really have developed where I think everybody wants to go, which is a full stack. So big discussions here was on ChatGPT. The second one was their upmarket growth. And the third one was a new service for entrepreneurs. They did go GA with their new browser, but I don't think that was nearly as important. So they announced an integration of ChatGPT with Zia, which is essentially their bot or helper or assistant that's already on the market. And they came out with 13 generative AI applications that were enhanced by it. In fact, the naming says everything. So for instance, it's Zoho CRM with generative AI. And then they added 4 or 5 new capabilities to analytics, to word processing, to mail, to social media, to products called assists, landing page, sales IQ, that's CRM, notebook, and data prep, which is exactly what it is, and meetings. So really cool. My workspace VP, Melody Brew, will be doing the detailed takedown, but I think the timing's good. I don't think they needed to be first, but I do think they will likely be first with the complete rollout. But like all of this stuff, this is the beginning. I want to get in. I want to kick the tires. I want to see how useful it is. By the way, this is with an alliance at first with OpenAI. In fact, you bring your API key and it leverages OpenAPI. They did talk about their strategy around this, which I think was important in their approach. And we're going to be writing more about that. In lieu of time, I'm going to go right to what I think is pretty cool, which is this new public beta of this product they have that Zoho does really well with small business. But now they're intercepting people as they're forming business, right? Where you can actually go onto this service and form your business, get EINs, get a website domain, get a telephony service, publish your information to Google Maps. And also they've added a simplified way to do analytics, a simplified version of a spreadsheet, a total mobile solution for CRM, finance, and action items, exactly as you might expect.
Yeah, I wasn't there, Pat. I'm looking forward to reading your write-up. And of course, 6 of the Futurum Group analysts were there. It was great to have such a large team. We are a Zoho user in our organization. Been impressed since day one about the size, scale, and scope of Zoho One. I think the company's been ambitious with leveraging the power of AI, and I'm eager to sort of see how generative AI could play into this. Look, generative AI is going to democratize so much capability inside of operations. And, I think this week's, the IBM story, Pat, about, them not hiring around Gen AI because of AI doing jobs. I think there's a 2-side to this story that's a really important nuance here. Generative AI is going to, help companies be more efficient and stop spending money on things. A company's fiduciary responsibility is not spend money on things it doesn't have to in order to do business. So hiring for the sake of hiring to just meet the good of hiring is not really good use of productivity. So what we need to do is figure out what that next wave of growth is. So getting roles out of this should be also part of an additive story about growth. So that's the second part of this equation that no one seems to quite have their arms around. What are the growth opportunities that are going to come out of all of this implementation of automation, of generative content, of thought leadership, of applications, workflows? So a tool like Zoho, I would expect on the small to mid-sized businesses is going to be an enabler. And of course, how much does this actually take the company into the future, into being a more able to participate in larger enterprise, which has been something Zoho has been trying to do over the past several years. So I'm looking forward to reading up on everything. I wasn't there, so I can't add much to what the content was yesterday, but it's always a good event. And, Pat, you and I always appreciate that they come here to Austin, to be part of it. So, all right, let's talk about some updates from Microsoft, Pat. OpenAI and Bing, continue to move forward. And, I think, and just let me make sure I got this data right, Pat, but this week, basically Microsoft announced that the AI-powered Bing is an open preview now. So this means that, where you and I, because we have, we're insiders, we're able to get early access. We've been playing with this for some time now. People more broadly are going to be able to take advantage of this. And, there was some data that was revealed, because I think a lot of people are wondering, Bing is, I think, the 3rd largest search engine, technically speaking. And that, the company obviously sees a $2 billion per 1% of market gain. That's what they shared on their finance day during their initial launch of the OpenAI partnership. So if Microsoft can go from single digit to say 20%, I think I calculated as something like a $26 billion a year annual financial opportunity for the company. That's pretty significant. But the problem with Bing, and Pat, you and I might differ in our opinions, is when I used Bing versus Google, at least in the traditional search days, it just didn't cut the mustard for me. It was not good enough in terms of being able to find what I needed to find. With OpenAI, with ChatGPT-4 being embedded inside of Bing, it did change the equation. So now the company came out talking a little bit about what this has meant for the organization. And they gave some data. I think they said that in the last 3 months, there's been over 500 million search queries in Bing. And that during this period of time, they've seen their growth in users hit over 100 million. And I believe I don't know that that's daily actives. That would be pretty remarkable if that's where it's at, but that's a really, really big growth rate for the company. The company has also been very focused on making Bing visual, meaning that Bing, and that's one thing right now, if you play with Bard, it does not do. It should, and it will. Pat, you and I were talking about how cool it will be when they integrate a YouTube engine to be able to ingest something like a podcast. But first and foremost, how can you do more visual? So they're doing image and video with Bing right now. They're also, adding more and more multi-session. So meaning you can go back into your histories and continue conversations. That's something that's being added. And by the way, here's probably the third thing that's really interesting and that we haven't talked a lot about is where does the developer fit into all this? For the last 3 or 4 years, have we talked about something as probably a great career opportunity more than developing? Like if you can do something in your career, you should learn to code.
Yeah.
Coding will be the future. And as long as you know how to code, you'll always be employable. Boy, does that feel like a different conversation today. I'm not saying that being a great coder won't still have an opportunity, but with all the speech to code and the capabilities that are being discussed right now, even if it doesn't work today, how long of a horizon do we really have before the speech to code or the augmented code that's being done with natural language processing through these large language models becomes really, really good? And I don't know if you've read across the internet yet, Pat, but some really good coders have written some stuff. I've read some Substacks and other things that they're using this. So, where it used to be GitHub and you were sharing open source and, nobody codes anything from scratch anymore. That's kind of the thing. And now you're taking things that are already sort of pre-built and you're then adding Copilot and then you're adding, the capability for large language models and generative. We're going to build tools really, really fast and it's going to happen really quick. I wrote an article on it. It'll post today on the Futurum Research blog. And by the way, I wrote it with GPT-4. I dictated some notes after I read the release with all the data, and I pushed it through GPT-4, and then I took it live because, I don't know, I'm a bot now. What the hell? All right, Pat, over to you.
I use Microsoft Bing and Edge AI features every day, and Daniel, you were right when you first said it is in fact 100 million daily active users. Okay, which is pretty incredible. 2 big messages here. First of all, opening this up to everybody and open. I mean, it's literally open. Anybody can get access to this. You don't have to be on a list. That in itself shows the degree of maturity. And the only reason they're calling it a preview is because it's not perfect. And preview allows them, if they see somebody, pulls up something that's just wrong, it'll probably be preview for a long time. That's just my guess to be conservative. What I really liked about this, it hit some of the snags in my own experience, and not that it's all about me, Daniel, but sometimes it's about me. And I do think that being an active user of this technology, I have higher bar for that. So first of all, the Edge helper that's out there just didn't cut it for summarizing documents for me. Now it works better with PDFs. It works better with websites. And I saw it actually will work with YouTube video links. And I am so excited. And I think people are going to be so excited to use this. They also integrated images into, used to have to do separate image versus text, but now you're going to be getting image results back, which again, it's simplification, right? People don't, necessarily want to go to a separate place in text versus imagery. So, anyways, I think we have to use this announcement at least I am, that Microsoft is in the lead with consumers on this. Not that Google won't catch up, but when you open it up to the planet and the other company hasn't, what are you going to say, right? It's just a fact, not even necessarily opinion. So I love this drag race. It's all about innovation. Innovation is good. Innovation lowers costs. Innovation increases capabilities. And we have an amazing race here in consumer. And very clear, this is consumer, not commercial. I am doubly excited to see. I want to use Office 365 with generative AI.
There you go, Pat. What a show. What a show. We did it. We came back. We were running a little bit late, but we got back on the rails. My friend, what a great show. Earnings Palooza, once again, is over for a quarter. We will have a smattering of earnings. We'll have the Cisco, Dell, NVIDIA, Marvell, and a handful of others that will pop. But the big weeks of a flood of earnings, we have survived it yet again. And Pat, now we're going into event season. And by the way, not just other people's events, but our events. The 6.5, baby. The 6.5 Summit coming the first week of June, Pat. We couldn't be more excited to have Hock Tan, CEO of Broadcom, as our kickoff speaker. And then we've got an amazing lineup, over 45 clients that are participating yet again this year, Pat. So many sessions, so many topics. You can bet AI is going to be a big part of the conversation this year. And we're going to be focusing on navigating the rough waters that are our economy, but with a bit of optimism, a bit of purpose, a bit of prescriptive advice for how people can move forward. Pat, you want to say anything to these people before I send them off?
Take care. I don't care whether, actually, we got to go. Thank you. We love you. Take care.
All right, everybody. You heard it here. Hit subscribe. See you later.